I've just finished reading a book by Alan Watson, W-A-T-S-O-N, called Churchill's Greatest Speeches in 1946, the speeches that saved the world. We all know, of course, of Churchill's amazing ability to rally the civilized world against Hitler in 1940. But we really have not paid enough attention to the two speeches he gave in 1946 that essentially saved the world. And Alan Watson has written about them, and it's fascinating. The first one was at Fulton, Missouri, in early 1946, when he warned of Russian aggression. And the second was 6 months later in Zurich, in Switzerland, where he called for European integration. In the first speech, there was a climate after World War II that called Stalin was Uncle Joe. And there was this paternalistic feeling about him, and this guy who absolutely would mind his pledges and would do what he said, and who had been dependable as an ally in defeating Hitler. People obliterated from memory the alliance between Hitler and Stalin earlier in the war, and they came to embrace Stalin as a good, reliable, dependable ally. And Churchill was having none of it. He warned that Russia was taking over Europe. And he said, from the Baltic to the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended upon Europe, where nobody could get out, and the communist countries were walled off from the rest of Europe. And he warned that Russia was installing puppet governments in those countries, and that it had designs on Western Europe, and called on the West to unite and mobilize and stop their aggression. The speech was given in Fulton, Missouri. Harry Truman was the president, and he, of course, was from Missouri. And he traveled to Fulton with Churchill in a railroad car. Isn't that cute? And on the 17-hour trip, Churchill and Truman talked a great deal about his forthcoming speech. But after Churchill gave the speech, Truman chickened out. There was a left-wing reaction, and they called Churchill a warmonger and said that he was just alarmist. And Truman distanced himself from Churchill, saying he had not seen the speech in advance, which was a lie. He had seen it and had approved it. But in any case, Churchill was out there by himself. But events gradually began to vindicate him. Then, 6 months later, he spoke in Zurich, and he said that Russia is not going to be stopped. Communism will not be held at the door unless Europe unites. And when Europe unites, he said, we must not exclude countries permanently that are currently excluded. And by that he meant Germany. And he called for a French-German reconciliation only about 20 months after the war had stopped. An unbelievably prescient thing to do. He said, unless you guys bury the hatchet with each other, you're both going to be taken over by the communists. And he also said that the United States would not give Europe the aid that it needed to recover unless Europe were united. And if all we were doing with our aid was fueling another European conflict, like World War I or World War II, the American taxpayer wouldn't go for it. And in that he anticipated the Marshall Plan, anticipated the formation of NATO, and the whole function of American cooperation with the European nations to assure security in Europe and in the United States. It was an amazing performance of two unbelievable speeches when he was in opposition. You know, when Churchill lost the election in May of 1945, he figured everything was gone. He fell into a deep depression. His wife said that this may be a blessing in disguise, and he said it is rather effectively disguised at the moment. But it was, because it freed him to speak out, and he gave these two memorable speeches that absolutely shaped the entire history of the world. Thanks for watching.